How much money are you thinking of giving people in Greenland to get them on board with a possible U.S. takeover?
I'm not talking about money for Greenland yet. I might talk about that. But right now, we are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland. And we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor. Okay? I would like to make a deal, the easy way, but if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way.
Why is it so important to you to own it when you have a military presence there, which you could expand to affect the security?
Because when we own it, we defend it. You don't defend leases the same way. You have to own it. With a nation, look at what happened with Obama, with that horrible deal they made with Iran. It was a short-term deal. It was like a 9-year deal. Countries can't make 9-year deals or even 100-year deals. Countries have to have ownership.
Greenland has recently become a hotly contested island, with the U.S. administration unapologetically stating that it ought to be the 51st state of the U.S. going forward. Amid these conversations, the names of two countries have emerged, Russia and China. So, the question is, why have U.S. leaders like Donald Trump argued that China and Russia are poised to take over Greenland if the U.S. doesn't act first? More importantly, are China and Russia actually threatening Greenland? And is acquiring Greenland really a national security issue? We're examining facts, official statements, and expert analysis, not speculation. In recent weeks, President Donald Trump has repeatedly said the United States needs Greenland for security reasons. He claimed the island must not be left to Russia or China, arguing that without the U.S. control, these powers would dominate Greenland.
What happens with Greenland? We need Greenland for national security, so we're going to see what happens. They're going to brief me on the meeting right after this conference. In fact, the sooner I get you out, the faster I'm going to know exactly what happened. But we have a very good relationship with Denmark, as you know. We'll see. But, we're doing the Golden Dome. We're doing a lot of things, and we really need it. If we don't go in, Russia's going to go in, and China's going to go in. And there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it, but we can do everything about it.
There's no more than what they can do than
Well, we're going to see. We're going to see what happens. But we need it. I'm not the first one. This was talked about by President Truman, and 40 years before President Truman they were talking about it. They've been talking about this for 100 years. This is not anything so new. A lot of people don't realize that, but this was a hot subject, probably not as hot as it is now, but it was a hot subject for a long time. We need it for national security, and that includes for Europe. And I spoke with, as you know, Mark, the head of...
On social media, Trump wrote that anything less than that is unacceptable. He even suggested that NATO should back the U.S. efforts to obtain control of the island. These comments have dominated headlines, with descriptions of a looming geopolitical scramble. So, where are Russia and China in all of this? While an older Kremlin spokesperson once said Moscow was closely watching Trump's Greenland remarks and emphasized that the Arctic is of strategic importance to Russia, this was a measured diplomatic response, not a declaration of intent to seize Greenland. On the other hand, there has been no public Chinese military claim on Greenland recently. China's Arctic interest historically has come in the form of investment talks. For example, previous Chinese interest in infrastructure projects. But China does not have naval or military activity near Greenland itself. Regional officials say claims of Chinese or Russian ships around the island are not borne out by evidence. In short, China and Russia are not publicly signaling a plan to take over Greenland. Major U.S. allies have been vocal in response. Danish and Greenlandic leaders have said Greenland is not for sale and rejected U.S. ambitions as a breach of sovereignty. Denmark's foreign minister called the idea that the U.S. should take over the island a fundamental disagreement. European Commission leaders have underscored that Greenland's sovereignty must be respected, and NATO collective security should not be weaponized for territorial acquisition.
If the United States chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops. That is, including NATO, and thus the security that has been provided since the end of the Second World War.
I think it will be a breakdown of rule of law and international law and existing agreements and treaties, and I think that would be a bad outcome and a big shame for us, because I think we have all prospered a lot from the NATO alliance.
I know in NATO you guys do and did all sorts of planning for every imaginable contingency. The situation that's unfolding now in Greenland, was that one of them?
No. We are preparing plans for our adversaries, not for our allies.
How does all this leave you feeling?
It's a bit weird. I think NATO is too important for the United States, and therefore I cannot imagine that this will lead to an invasion of the United States in Greenland.
Rob Bauer, until recently NATO's top soldier, believes it's possible to win Trump over with strong demonstrations of force by NATO, such as exercises, and by appealing to other Americans who support the alliance.
If you look at the Senate, there's a large majority for NATO. In the United States, the last polling indicates an increase in support for NATO. It's now 70%, which is quite high for the US in the last couple of months. If the president would turn away from NATO, he will have to do a lot of explaining inside his own nation.
NATO has been tested by internal crises in the past and shown resilience. In 1966, France pulled its forces out of unified NATO command and didn't return until 2009. Turkey and Greece, both NATO members, have come close to going to war against each other, and there was deep acrimony over the US invasion of Iraq in 2003. Each time, nations pulled back before causing lasting damage to the alliance, says Bauer.
Officials from Norway and other Nordic states have also openly disputed claims that multitudes of Russian and Chinese vessels surround Greenland. These responses show that even allies are distancing themselves from the idea that Greenland must be owned by one power to be secure. Let's break down the real situation in the Arctic. Russia does have a strong Arctic military presence on its own territory, bases, air defense, or patrols. Ideally, China conducts research and some naval activity in Arctic waters, but not around Greenland specifically according to navigation data and expert analysis, but the United States already operates military facilities in Greenland under long-standing agreements with Denmark. Though Chinese companies have featured prominently in public debates in both Greenland, Denmark, and beyond, there is little evidence to support the idea that Chinese firms are eager to invest in Greenland, despite substantial efforts by the Greenland administration to attract them. Chinese investment in iron ore, for example, has slowed in recent years after a series of ill-advised investments in Western Australia have proved unprofitable and have become a burden on the domestic iron and steel industry. In fact, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian accused Washington of using the so-called China threat as a pretext for itself to seek selfish gains. So, while the Arctic is strategically important for shipping routes, missile early warning systems, and rare earth minerals, there is no verified, imminent threat of Russia or China taking over Greenland by force. So why does U.S. leaders talk about Greenland in national security terms? The first reason is Greenland's location. Greenland sits between North America and Europe near the Jiaoyukai Gap, a key naval and air corridor that is important for monitoring any potential threats. The second reason revolves around military presence. The U.S. already maintains the Patuffik Space Base and has rights to increase its presence under defense agreements with Denmark. Patuffik SB exists today due to agreements between the United States and the Kingdom of Denmark, specifically addressing mutual defense. Strategically, Patuffik SB's top-of-the-world vantage point enables space superiority. Patuffik SB supports missile warning, missile defense, and space surveillance missions from the solid-state phased array radar operated by the 12th Space Warning Squadron, 12 SWS, and satellite command and control through the Patuffik Tracking Station operated by the 22nd Space Operations Squadron, Detachment 7. The third reason has to do with resources. Greenland has minerals that are critical for technology and energy markets. It holds rich natural resources, including oil, rare earth minerals, and uranium, an important element for nuclear power. None of this means that Russia or China are actively planning to take control, but it does explain why powers are paying more attention to the Arctic as a region. Here are the key reasons why acquiring Greenland, rather than cooperating with Denmark and NATO, isn't actually an urgent security necessity. First, Allied cooperation on defense already exists. Denmark, NATO, and Allied forces operate in the region. Secondly, There is no clear evidence of hostile military buildup near Greenland. Nordic diplomats reject claims of Russian or Chinese fleets nearby. Thirdly, Greenlanders have rejected annexation. Local leaders have repeatedly said they want to remain with Denmark and uphold sovereignty. International law also matters. Annexing the territory of an ally would undermine NATO and global norms. In other words, there are practical security concerns in the Arctic, but they don't require a territorial takeover. So, is the U.S. justified in saying China and Russia are threats to Greenland? Current evidence suggests no. And is acquiring Greenland a national security emergency? Not by most expert measures.